Well, yes, to be clear, so what we agreed to is there's 5 major segments of the corridor where the punch list items lie right now. They're going to address one of these segments at a time with our deficiency list. We plan to sit down 3 weeks in advance to go over construction issues, but as we spoke in the hallway, engineering might need a little more time than that. So our first meeting is we're going to have to set up with engineering to discuss outstanding design issues in any one of these segments, get approved submittals to go forward, so all the work is approved prior to actually starting.
How much time, if we move this forward, you have a choice of 21 days or 28 days, which would you prefer?
I would say 28 days. We're going to need some time to make sure that things are actually being executed. I think 21 days would be a little premature.
Okay, Dr. Campos, so 4 weeks from today would be what day?
That would be Monday, January 14th.
Okay, Monday, January 14th. That's not a holiday, correct?
It is not.
Okay, then we'll schedule Monday, January 14th for the continued updated new and improved summary of what's happening after you've had a chance. That'll be December 14th for the continued update, new and improved hearing, where you'll provide a summary after you've had a chance to sit down with the various stakeholders that you work with on a daily basis, and you can bring that summary to the board. Before I go to Commissioner Jacinto, though, let me just say to the Bureaus of Contract Administration and Engineering, to Metro, and to Walshay, thank you for your work that got this, as Chris has at least summarily described as a detailed document closer to what we were looking for some time ago. We appreciate the work in getting it to us now. Commissioner Jacinto.
Yeah, thank you, President James. I just wanted to support that. Thanks and appreciation to Metro, the contractor, Walshay, and Chris, to you and BCA, Bureau of Contract Administration, for keeping up, for driving for what we need in order to make sure that we have everything, this last 10% punch list, all the different items. It's good to know that it was submitted, and so that it'll take some weeks to go over detail with the city family so we can come back, hopefully here at the Board of Public Works, and report that everything is planned and locked in. We're ready to do this and to stitch it up. So I want to thank everybody else as well.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. And Chris, is there anything substantive that you wanted to put on the record today, or is it better just to wait until January 14th?
I think I would like to wait and take a real good look at that schedule before I spoke on it. It's quite intense and complex.
Okay, great. Same with Metros and Walshay. We're good until January 14th. Is that date okay with our team from Metro and Walshay? Great. So January 14th will be the updated date.
Very good.
Thank you, Chris,
Thank you.
and thank you all for getting that work to us before the holidays. So the oral report on number 11 will be received. Moving to the oral report on agenda item number 10, Urban Forestry Management Plan, City Plants, and DUDEC. Again, as I'd mentioned at the beginning of the hearing, thank you, Mr. Clark. As I'd mentioned at the beginning of the hearing this morning, if there's anyone that wants to speak on the item, please send your speaker cards in sooner rather than later so we can arrange them accordingly. And is there a second to my motion on our meeting minutes to approve the meeting minutes of Monday, November 19th, 2018 by Commissioner Garcia? Any objection? Without objection, we will approve those meeting minutes. Ms. Skurzat, on our oral report on agenda item number 10.
Good morning, commissioners, staff, and ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Elizabeth Skurzat, the Executive Director of City Plants, and I'm here to introduce Michael Huff from DUDEC, the contractor that completed the first step towards an urban forestry management plan for Los Angeles. It's essentially the assessment phase of a UFMP, and a UFMP is a document that helps a city organize itself among its various departments to manage its urban forest proactively into the future. So before I bring up Mr. Huff from DUDEC, I would first like to thank you, the board, the leadership of the city, and Mayor Eric Garcetti's office for your leadership in this project. About a year and a half ago, we had the pleasure of applying for a grant to be able to do this project. And without your leadership and support, it would not have been possible. So with match funding from Mayor Garcetti's office, from the Bureau of Street Services, and from the Department of Recreation and Parks, as well as our 6 nonprofit partners, we were able to get this grant to be able to do this work for Los Angeles. And the comparative city study, which you are about to see the results of, was actually the idea of Mayor Eric Garcetti's office. In fact, the Director of Infrastructure absolutely insisted upon it as part of the project. So I would like to thank you for your leadership in this matter. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Michael Huff from DUDEC to give the report.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Huff. I was able to hear roughly the back half of your presentation, 10 days ago or so, and we're very happy that you're able to make yourself available this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting us to present our findings. I am Michael Huff, Principal Urban Forester with DUDEC, and with me today is Ryan Allen, Urban Forester with DUDEC. Our partner, Urban Forest Innovations out of Canada, could not be here today, but we will present their part. Ryan will be presenting their part. We have, with the completion of this plan, the city has truly taken its first step towards the UFMP, the Urban Forest Management Plan. A lot of what's in this plan, you'll see, could be directly dropped into the Urban Forest Management Plan when it's prepared. And the rest of it is a framework that will guide the completion of that important document.
And Mr. Huff, just for the record, since we're making a record, I would like to acknowledge as well that our Assistant Director of the Bureau of Street Services over the Urban Forestry Division, Greg Spots, is present, as is our Chief Urban Forester, Tim Tyson. So go ahead.
Thank you. Before I go over what we'll be covering today, I just wanted to acknowledge everyone who helped put this plan together, from all of the urban forestry stakeholders, from the city departments to the nonprofits, and many others that participated throughout the extent of this 10-month period. Especially would like to thank City Plants, and mostly for championing this project and kind of envisioning and coming forward with it. Also the funders, CAL FIRE and Forest Service, and then also the team members from DUDEC and UFI that put a lot of hours into getting this plan in front of you. What we'll go over today, Ryan will come up and talk about this first step plan, what it is, why it was done. He will also talk about urban forest sustainability, which is a key component of how the analysis was done for the City of Los Angeles's program. And then I'll come back up and go through some comparison city results, results from our online survey, and then I'll present key findings and recommendations. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ryan, and he can introduce you to the topic.
And while you're doing that, I also will state for the record that we have our representatives from the Mayor's Office of City Services, Ms. Pope, and Ms. Crossan, our Director of Infrastructure from the Mayor's Office. Go ahead, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. The first step plan...
Sir, your last name for us?
I'm sorry, Ryan Allen. I'm an urban forester with DUDEC. The first step plan we like to call a roadmap to an urban forest management plan. If you're unfamiliar with what an urban forest management plan is, the main element of it is setting a vision for the urban forest. That vision that is created within the city is the guiding principle for all the management activities that go on with planning, ordinances, tree planting, whatever it is that's tree related. That vision is the guiding principle that all those activities are building towards. An inventory and assessment of the trees needs to be completed, so real data is available to make strategic goals and objectives and create a plan, and then further come up with the steps to implement that plan. So basically, when the urban forest management plan is completed, the city will have its guiding document for managing its trees that will also be able to inform all the other city documents, like a general plan or the Mayor's Sustainable City Plan that reference the urban forest. After that's completed, it's going to need to be monitored and adjusted accordingly, because we're not going to be able to predict over a 40-year period what threats and emerging things might change within the city, so it'll need to be continually updated as needed. Why was it prepared? Basically, the city isn't quite ready yet to do a full urban forest management plan. There needs to be a completed tree inventory, an assessment of the trees, a canopy cover analysis, so that that real-time data and information can be compiled to make strategic goals and objectives. But like it was said earlier, this first step is the first phase of an urban forest management plan, where you're doing the initial analysis of city practices, the governance structure, and fully understanding the scope of the urban forest, so you're able to move forward in creating new policies and ordinances to manage the city's trees. The first step report was completed with many hours of support from all the key urban forestry stakeholders in the city of Los Angeles, from the mayor's office, city council staff, Recreation and Parks, Urban Forest Division, Planning, Sanitation, City Plants, CFAC, all the nonprofit partners and community stakeholders all contributed their valuable information and insights on the roles that they play within the city and the resources that they need to complete their tasks. We were able to gather some of that information through working groups that met over a 10-month period, and we also completed departmental interviews with all those key stakeholders to really get in-depth information on what goes on in the inner workings in the urban forest management in Los Angeles. Like we stated, we compared Los Angeles to New York City, San Francisco, and Melbourne, so we can compare the management activities of Los Angeles with other cities that are known to have exceptional urban forest management plans to learn, or programs, so we can learn what they do and best practices that they have, and that we can balance that against what we're currently doing in Los Angeles. And then finally, we had a public survey that was completed by 2,600 participants that gave us a lot of insight on what people value in trees in Los Angeles, what they understand about how Los Angeles manages its trees and maintenance activities, and its general understanding of the urban forest. So after that, all that information was gathered, DUDEC and UFI got together and completed our evaluation analysis, which is reflected in the first step report. Why does LA need a UFMP? Basically, to move Los Angeles towards a sustainable urban forest. And this tree-lined street is kind of the goal of what Los Angeles can look like if we're managing our trees in a sustainable manner. We say sustainability is a broad general goal because the services that trees provide aren't one specific item. We're not managing a field of corn that's going to give us a crop at the end of the year, every year, but there's multiple environmental, economic, health and social services that trees provide that we want to maximize as a resource for the community with a sustainable urban forest. That's important right now for many reasons, one of which are invasive pests, which are an ever-present threat to trees in Los Angeles. Having the port and trade from around the world coming in constantly, there's always the potential for a new invasive pest to sneak aboard and make its way into Los Angeles. Climate change brings in more pests, and you can see here one of our local pests, the invasive shot-hole borer, is working its way through Los Angeles, and it's having a really large impact on, especially on our native California sycamore species. With a sustainable urban forest, we have a diverse species of trees throughout the city, so if one particular tree is being affected largely by a pest, it won't drastically affect the entire scope of the tree population. The drought, as we know, has been ongoing for years and will be a foreseeable issue that Los Angeles is dealing with moving forward. The U.S. Forest Service estimates 129 million trees have died since 2010 in California due to the drought, and we can see the effects of the drought on the trees throughout Los Angeles. Drought-stressed trees that are dying are hazardous, but in a sustainable urban forest, we're able to manage that risk and provide a safer tree environment. It also means we're planting low water use trees and trees that are appropriate for the climate that Los Angeles has today, but also the future climate that Los Angeles will have. So when there's these ongoing periods of little rainfall, the trees can be sustained through that. In addition to the environmental threats to our trees, human threats are just as important. This chart represents a study done by USC on green cover loss. throughout the 20 largest cities in the Los Angeles basin in a 10-year period from 2000 to 2009. And what that loss was referring to is increased home size on lots. So basically, people, what we call mansionization sometimes, but building bigger houses on lots than what they typically were meant for.
Building to the lot line.
Correct. Thank you. The report found that there was a 1.2% annual decrease in tree canopy cover because of this action. So in addition to the environmental threats, our planning and our human interactions with our trees are also an important aspect of why we need a sustainable urban forest. And then most importantly are the people threat. This is the Coronavirus Screen 3.0 map, which breaks down census tracts throughout the state of California and gives them a rating of how vulnerable they are to pollution hazards. And that rating of the darkest red is the most vulnerable, with the dark green being the least vulnerable. And hopefully you can tell there's a significant amount of Los Angeles that is extremely vulnerable to pollution hazards. And also, just as importantly, most of those communities are also our most economically disadvantaged communities in Los Angeles. So in addition to the trees being threatened, the health and the vibrancy of our city is at risk and most directly impacting our disadvantaged communities. These are some of the myriad of services that trees provide. Most of these I'm assuming we're familiar with: cleaner air, reducing stormwater, runoff, or reducing urban heat island effect, saving energy. LA's trees can provide substantially more services than this. Having the largest urban forest in the nation, our trees can do many more things for us if we have a sustainable urban forest. Being able to achieve that means having larger, more mature trees. The older and bigger a tree gets, the more services we receive from it. So while a smaller tree like a western redbud is providing services to the city, the bigger a tree gets and the older it gets, the more we're getting back from it in the services that it provides. This is important on 2 points. One, we need to make sure we have the growth space, and we need to be able to plant larger stature trees. But it also means the city needs to be responsible from the time that we plant a tree, for the establishment care, the pruning, and through its end-of-life cycle, to make sure that we're receiving the maximum services that a tree can provide. Urban forest sustainability, we say, has 3 tenets. The first of which is that it provides a service rather than a good. So like I was saying earlier, we're not harvesting corn for a specific crop every year, but there's the suite of services of clean air, stormwater reduction that trees provide to us. Sustainable urban forests require human intervention. The trees in Los Angeles, with few exceptions, were planted as the city grew and developed. Because of that, because we put them here, it's going to be incumbent upon people to continue to maintain them and sustain them. We simply can't plant a tree and expect it to grow. We can't have a sustainable urban forest without continual human intervention. And finally, trees growing on private land comprise the majority of the urban forest. It's estimated that roughly 90% of the urban forest of Los Angeles is made up of trees on private property. That means the private property owners, homeowners, play a really large role in ensuring a sustainable urban forest and growing the canopy cover in Los Angeles. So to kind of summarize what urban forest sustainability means, one, you have the vegetation resource, which are the trees and the services they provide. Two, you have the people, the community framework, and our need to derive those services from trees. And then finally, the resource management, which is the urban forest management plan, which provides the vision based off the needs of the people to manage that resource to receive those services. We wanted to be able to somewhat numerically quantify where Los Angeles is in having a sustainable urban forest, and we were able to use the Vibrant Cities Lab gap score analysis tool. This was created through a combination of multiple research papers and studies that have been done on what are the criteria and indicators that make up a sustainable urban forest. It's more than just meeting a tree canopy cover goal. They identified 26 different factors that go into the management, public education, data, assessment of trees that all are needed to have a sustainable urban forest. The way this gap score analysis works is it takes you through questions that go through the criteria and indicators of a sustainable urban forest and asks you to rate where you think your city's management currently is and what you would like the goal to be for the city. The difference between the current and the goal is the gap that the city has to sustainability. We were able to get information from either urban forest who works with those cities or work within those cities and have them do a gap score analysis for Melbourne, Irvine, and Toronto, Canada. And you can see Melbourne, Australia, one of our comparison cities, is considered to have a world-class urban forest, but even still they are lacking in certain areas and have a gap to having an optimally ran sustainable urban forest. We completed this with the working group in Los Angeles working group. The working group members selected where they viewed the current rating was for Los Angeles, and they selected what the goal should be. And the results were a total score of 2 with a goal of 109 and a gap of 107. And I know that number seems a little large and shocking perhaps, but it's important to note that there are very basic immediate steps the city can take, such as completing its inventory, assessing its tree, having tree health, doing a canopy cover analysis, and starting an urban forest management plan that can bring up that gap score in a very short time frame. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Now I'm going to go through some comparison city results, and I'm going to go fairly quickly, and we're at a high level. The detail is all in the report, so if you want it, it's there. We did pick a subset of a set of cities that the working group had provided to us. We picked Melbourne because of some similarities in climate and challenges they're facing as the climate becomes warmer. New York City and San Francisco were very similar with budget decreases during the recession. They've ramped up out of them, and LA has not in terms of its urban forest. Some of the things that the comparison cities all are doing is they all are responsible for tree management from the planting through removal and recycling. It's all the city's responsibility. In LA, that's not the case. Best management practices are implemented by each comparison city, meaning that they are at a sustainable level with their maintenance cycles, with their planting programs, with their removal and recycling programs. And generally, it comes down to funding. The next one, they all created management and funding approaches that were unique to the city. No two cities are going to be the same in how their urban forest program is funded. And LA certainly presents a lot of opportunities and challenges. But there are streams of revenue that could be available here that could help the situation. And then they all fund their urban forest management at sustainable levels. And it's not necessarily that when we're talking about sustainable level, it's sustainable for the urban forest, which provides the benefits, but it's sustainable for the funding itself. It can't be a 1 year we met our budget. It has to be in perpetuity for this to work. Regarding funding, here's an interesting table. You know, obviously the populations, the street tree numbers, the park tree numbers, they're all going to vary by city based on the size of the city. But when we get down to the per capita spending, we start to see some interesting findings. Right now, if you look at it, Los Angeles is trailing Melbourne and San Francisco on a per capita basis, how much money is spent per person on the forest. And it seems to compare with New York fairly favorably, but in fact, New York has twice the population and half the land area. So really, you could double what New York is spending per capita if you compared it to Los Angeles on a population basis. So the last line is really the one that jumps out. And LA is spending about $26 a tree, and that's 2.5 to 3 times less than any of our comparison cities, which are up in the $70 range. So that's a big thing. What does that tell us? Maybe that maintenance is being deferred, and quite possibly hazards are accumulating because the maintenance isn't occurring at the levels that it needs. Okay, we'll jump over to the online urban forest survey. We got over 2,600 surveys, and you can see on this first exhibit where they came from, the darker colors where we got more surveys. We'll move to the next one. How important are trees compared to other infrastructure? 80% say that trees are equally as important. So remember that number, 80% say it's equally as important, and we'll come back to that. 90% consider that trees need to be protected during construction projects. This was just a quote that jumped out from one of their survey takers. For such a green-thinking city, we lack severely in the actual green department. Let's change the nation's view of Los Angeles as a concrete jungle to something we can all be proud of. I thought that encapsulated a lot of what was said in those surveys. Moving on, about half of the respondents consider the trees, that their management is in the poor category. The other half consider it acceptable. 72% think their street doesn't have enough trees. 71% think their parks don't have enough trees. So on this one, the question is related to, would you be willing to engage in initiatives to improve the urban forest on city-owned lands? And the total is about 92% say maybe or yes. And about 93% say maybe or yes to do the same initiatives on private land. Now this is the one where we're going to come back to that 80% thinking that trees are just as important as every other infrastructure. You can see that 33% would support new policies, 16% the development of an urban forest management plan, and then only 2% would support new fines, fees, or taxes to fund it. So at one hand, they believe that it's important as any other infrastructure. On the other hand, they're not willing to necessarily pay for it. And I think the opportunity here is really related to public outreach and education regarding urban forestry services and value. And really, it's the investment and the return on that investment, which is verifiable now. It's measurable. Quickly move to our key findings. Number one, we say your trees are not valued in city budget and planning, and given a do-over, we might change that to trees are not prioritized in city budget and planning. And what we mean by that is they aren't prioritized the same as the other infrastructure. And you can simply look at the budgets and notice that that's the case. And it's the only infrastructure that appreciates over time versus depreciates. So it's one worth investing in. Number two, urban forest budgets are far below necessary levels. We'll go into that here in a little bit. Three, dedicated staff lack direction and vision from city leadership. We met a lot of folks. We talked to them, over the course of these 10 months, and the level of passion and understanding of the urban forest is great. And we think it's just missing that vision and working towards the same goals. For historical and ongoing scattered approach with little follow-through. I've got a table that we'll look at that will kind of point out what we mean by that. The city does not know enough about its trees. How can you know what you have if you don't have a recent tree inventory? Rec and Parks has information, and they're updating that. They're in the process of updating that. But for the majority, the 700,000 trees, simply relying on 1992 information. Number six, the city's technological urban forest management tools are incomplete. This is regarding tree management software, which I'll talk about more in a little bit. The city's urban forest has significant gaps to sustainability, which Ryan just presented. And the key is that this plan outlines a framework of things that as they get checked off, some of them need to happen sequentially, but as they get checked off, that gap is going to close rapidly and get to an acceptable level that puts you on par with other cities that are managing their forests well. Number nine, the city lacks comprehensive urban forest planning and management guidance. This goes back to our sifting through all of the different policies, plans, the general plan, diversity plans, resiliency plans, all of those, and noting which ones really start to address sustainable urban forestry, and not many of them say much about urban forestry, let alone the sustainability of them. Number 10, the Band-Aid approach hinders more holistic planning. That's our way of saying that because a lot is getting done. You look at the planting efforts that occur. A lot of it is funded outside of the city through grants. Or you look at Rec and Parks and what they're able to do on dwindling budgets, and same thing with Urban Forestry Division and what they're able to get done. It may be at the detriment of a more holistic approach that results in the kind of forest that then returns those benefits that we're after. So we'll go into our priority recommendations. Step one is the City Council and the Mayor must prioritize the urban forest. And how's that done? It's primarily by funding, frankly. It's getting the assessment done. So those tree inventory for the 700,000 street trees and other city facilities needs to occur. Fund the urban forest management plan. That's the key piece that's going to pull it all together and provide the way to reach that vision. What are the goals we need to put in place to reach that vision at the end? And then sustain future funding. Like I mentioned earlier, it's got to be from now till in perpetuity, because a one-time or a 5-year funding, it just doesn't get you there. This is the table. It's probably pretty hard to see, but it generally outlines a bunch of resolutions that have been posted. There's 22 resolutions up there, and there's only 6 that have actually been enacted or follow up with the report. These are from the City Council. All of them urban forestry related. Step 2, hire an urban forestry coordinator to make holistic adjustments. We're happy to see that a recent job announcement has been put out, and it follows pretty closely with our report's recommendations. What we see the position being is really a ground up, a bottom up approach to, sorry, hold on a second, I'm running out of breath. We see it being serving from the bottom and providing all the resources needed by all the great people who are providing the assistance that they have been for the urban forest. 3A, increase urban forestry funding to support sustainable management. Sustainable management reduces hazards over time. And there's been a trend right now of increased settlements from tree hazards. So over time, one would expect that to continue to go up without sustainable funding and maintenance. So that's an important component of this. Right now, the total budget, you can see in the table, UFD's at $21.6 million, and our estimate is they need about $55 to $65 million a year. Rec and Park is at about $3.8 million, and they need between $16 and $20 million a year to be at that sustainable level. Because funding is such a huge part of all of this, we strongly recommend that a municipal financing plan be prepared, and it focus on urban forestry, of course. And no stream of revenue should be off the table, including from social media, from donations, from any source, including the general plan, including tax allocations, including special district assessment districts. Nothing should be off the table and should be fully looked at by a special consultant who specializes in that. And then that increase needs to be reflected in the city budget. The estimated cost for that financing plan is about $200,000. Step 4A, complete a comprehensive tree inventory as soon as possible. As I mentioned, Rec and Parks has a tree inventory, and they just have been awarded grant funding, so they're going to update that in the next year. But UFD, I believe, is submitting a grant application, so if they get that funded, that should help get them going on that inventory. With 700,000 trees, it's probably going to take a year or 2 years to get that done. The average cost is somewhere between $2 and $3 per tree for an inventory like that. And we strongly recommend that it be done by professionals the first time. Updates can be done by then the tree contractors or the tree crews that are doing the tree maintenance work. And potentially, like New York, use some volunteer programs as well. We tend to shy away from that because the data is not as good or reliable. But the estimated cost would be $2 to $3 million for the complete inventory of not only trees but vacant spaces as well to help, with canopy cover goals. Step 4B is implement a tree management software program. Again, Rec and Parks is a little bit ahead of the curve. They have a program that they've been using. They just got an updated version of it, and they're happy with it. UFD is in the process of exploring various tree management software programs, and we would just recommend that they need to play, those software programs need to play nice. They need to be able to communicate and use the same data, which should be the CAL FIRE strict tree inventory data that includes all of the tree attributes. If not the same software, it should be very, very compatible. Go through that. Step number 5 is implement public outreach. As I said when I presented this a couple of weeks ago, this could easily be the first recommendation. We have it in here as number 5, but it's also important, as we saw in that public survey, there's a disconnect right now between the value of trees and spending money on trees. And really, I think we would recommend that the public outreach program is really similar to other major campaigns that the city has gone down the road, whether it's water conservation or others, where it's put together as a strategic approach, and all of the voices in the urban forest are sending the same message. And that message may change over time, but it's always unified and towards the vision that's laid out in the urban forest management plan. And we strongly recommend that the public survey that we got 2,600 responses for be reopened as well when the urban forest management plan process begins. Just for comparing LA with its 2,600 responses, in Pasadena with a similar survey, we got almost 700. So if you basically escalate that based on population, we should have gotten about 17,000 responses from LA. Number 6 is develop and implement an urban forest management plan. That's what we've been talking about. That's why this plan was done, is to make that process easier. So we've laid out a framework that takes the city down that path. And a lot of it is already done. There's a lot more to do, but there's a good significant chunk of it that is now done. The UFMP needs to begin, it can begin as the tree inventory begins, but preferably that tree inventory gets going quickly, because the UFMP cannot be completed until that inventory is done. It's probably a 2-year process to do a UFMP for Los Angeles. And then once it's done, Los Angeles will have a vision for its urban forest and the policies, ordinances, goals, management practices, and funding to support that vision. The estimate for the UFMP is about $400,000. So speaking of gaps, like we mentioned earlier, you look at the map in front of you, and there's some definite gaps where these top 10 urban forests, as named by American cities, occur, and especially the one I see is in the Southwest. And we believe Los Angeles can fill that role and be considered one of the top 10, maybe top 11 urban forests in the country. For anybody who wants more details, who doesn't have a copy of the report, you can go to this website on the screen, and there are complete PDF copies of it available there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huff. We'll take some questions from the board, and then we'll go to our speakers. You referenced just a couple of moments ago the funding need being roughly, is it $50 million? 50 to 65 million?
With both Rec and Parks and UFD, it's closer to 70 million.
Okay, so you got UFD is 55 to 65 million and another 16 to 20 million for Rec and Parks. So combine the two on the high end would be 85 million a year. You also referenced the success that that we've had recently with campaigns for funding, including Measure W. Most recently, we've had our transportation funding measure, Measure M. and just a number of others over the years. Have you worked on funding campaigns like Measure W, which is a property tax assessment, or Measure M, which was a sales tax assessment, things like that, to provide the kind of annual funding that the urban forest would need? Which, by the way, the numbers here are lower than what we were looking for in those campaigns, and significantly lower than Measure M.
I have not personally worked on campaigns like that, but there's a great template the city of San Francisco we would point you to. You can look online at their municipal finance study for urban forestry, and it's successfully now, they've been able to take back management of the trees, which they had pushed off onto the residents, and their program is now sustainably funded. So that's one that I would point you to as a great example.
Okay. And then just one other question, I may have more, but just a couple that struck me. Irvine was in one of the, it may have been the one that...
Gap analysis.
Yes. Irvine, granted, much smaller city than Los Angeles. Obviously, it was planned differently than Los Angeles. I don't know that you can necessarily compare them fairly, but I would ask, what were there common denominators in what you saw that Irvine did that Los Angeles could do?
Well, I think that the bottom line with Irvine, I've been working with Irvine for 20 plus years in urban forestry, and they've got funding. So they can actually maintain the trees. Some of their trees species are maintained annually. Others are maintained 2-3 years, and then the majority of them are 5-year maintenance cycles. So if you had that kind of funding, proportionally, the city of Los Angeles forest health it would be much better. And then they've looked at numerous times over the years at species diversity, and where do we have problems with too many trees of the same species, so that planning for a potential outbreak.
We got an A in species diversity, though.
Well, how do we know?
Oh, okay.
Where's the inventory that tells us we are?
I thought
really
it was
there?
in your document, but okay.
Oh, I don't.
That's not.
This, well, so based on 92, 96
Based on
data.
96.
Yeah, so we don't know what's happened between then and now. We can assume there's a lot of species here, but what is it? Diversity is looked at citywide. Maybe you get an A. What about council district wide or neighborhood wide, or even on some cases street level? You look at diversity. So all of that would be part of the urban forest management plan process to make sure that you're building a resilient forest. So if it's drought, if it's pests, who knows, fire in some cases, that your forest is going to be able to withstand that.
So you mentioned pests. That's does the model in Irvine, does that also work for dealing with the pest issue that we would see or that we do see in Los Angeles?
It certainly, when you have healthy trees, it certainly helps them. And some pests, though, prefer healthy trees. So the goal would just be to get your trees and your population as healthy as possible, and have a diversity of species, but also diversity of ages, because pests, fairly rarely would all attack the same age trees, or different trees, I should say, different ages. They tend to focus maybe on a mature tree, or if they're a younger tree, they'll focus on younger trees. It just depends on the species of pest. But there's nothing that's a 100% safety net. But I would bet Irvine's would handle a pest outbreak better than LA's, just based on the average health of the trees.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Cabello.
Thank you, President James, and thank you so much for this report. It's incredibly comprehensive. In one of your slides, you referenced CalEnviro screen, and you also have a slide regarding increased density, and you can see the overlap there. And then looking at your map of the public survey, it's almost like the inverse. The people who are engaged in the issue, who are responding to the issue, tend to not be those people who are most at risk. So in terms of public outreach for the survey and public outreach moving forward, which maybe is more of a city plans, the UFD question, what kind of outreach, and was it multilingual that was done?
It was. The survey was distributed both in English and Spanish, and it was distributed through a variety of means, both, social media and the internet, as well as hard copies at different events, whether they were, tree plantings or Arbor Day events, Earth Day events, things like that. So it had a pretty wide reach, but I think I would say that's a pretty insightful comment, that in those areas where you see that maybe the public isn't as concerned about trees, they should maybe be focused on a little bit more.
And I would also add that not only focused on in terms of outreach and education, but made priority when we actually do implement the plan.
I agree.
Thank you, Commissioner Cabello. Commissioner Jacinto.
Thank you, President James. And Michael, thank you for this report. And Ryan, having, in all transparency, having been one of the interviewees that you mentioned in terms on page 63 of the basic perspectives about this, I think it was right on in terms of what you captured and what you were able to gather from the multiple stakeholders. I will say to City Plants, I want to thank them for taking the lead to get the resources to get to this place, the first step. So there's a lot of steps, because this is the pre-urban forestry management plan. This is the first step. But it is an important first step, so thank you to the City Plants family. And when you look at it, it's like we're developing managing an ecosystem to manage an ecosystem. A lot of different players. In page 61, you mentioned 7 different entities that have to work together collaboratively. You mentioned silos. You mentioned lack of initiative here and there, and that's all fair. I understand that this administration and its under Mayor Garcetti's leadership is really honed in on back to basics, and the urban forestry is an absolute part of that. Yes. So I'm going to say I look with optimism to the future. I think that the power that you mentioned lies in the advocacy of the citizenry of Los Angeles to make sure that our local government has the wherewithal to provide as much city resources as possible to fund that, but also to create a very creative way, as you mentioned, alternatives. Nothing is out of the question when we talk about funding and creating a sustainable pipeline of resources and all things. And President James mentioned whether it's a measure, whether it's a bond, something. So we want to look at everything in order to get that gap score, and we know that we can make some big movements. So I expect that we're going to make some important decisions, including the coordinator position, who will be able to, as you say, from a ground up, be able to coordinate all that. So I want to thank you and the rest of all our advocates here of being present to move forward with us. And I said at the opening, at the report, is, together in partnership, together in trees, and together we can do it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacinto. Commissioner Davis.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And Michael, thank you very much for the report. I too found the report to be comprehensive, and in terms of the gap analysis that you have made, one of the discoveries that you shared with us was that we don't know enough about our inventory. And so obviously there is a lack of knowledge about how many trees we do have in the city of Los Angeles. And yet you have stated that some of the inventory that we do have is dated back to 1996. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So in terms of if our inventory came from 96, how would you describe the gap between today and in 96? What in fact was it that contributes to this gap between 96 and to current day's status of our not knowing about our trees?
Well, I think that 96 was just the last time the inventory was completed. That's not to say that the city was managing at a sustainable urban forestry level back then either. In fact, pre-recession, it still was below where it needed to be. The differences between that inventory and now, there have been a lot of trees planted, but there are a lot of trees that are dying and being removed as well. Given shot hole borer, for one example, that's taken out a lot of trees. So the gap back then may have been every bit as big as the gap that we found today, but it just, that analysis wasn't available back then. That would have been one area where maybe the city scored a little better. We did have an inventory, but inventories have sort of this useful lifespan that's pretty short. it's important to get that understanding, and then now more and more cities are relying on the folks who are doing the tree maintenance to actually update every tree, so you have virtually a perpetual inventory that's going on. And then that data is useful, and it doesn't become outdated. You can still rely on it to make, planning decisions.
In your research, did you discover that between 96 and now that there are a lack of systems or a lack of engagement on our behalf in assessment of our inventory? If you have mentioned that our last current inventory, based upon your research, was in 96, and that obviously you've not shared with us any current results of inventory in 2018, has there been a lack of implementation of a system or routine work that we should be doing as it relates to the upkeep of our inventory?
Yeah, I think we're saying in this report that that's one of the key findings is to be a sustainable urban forestry city, you've got to know what you have, and then you have to have a way to query that database and use it for not only for managing it, but for planning for the future to get to that vision. That's what tree management software programs are so good at helping with. But is it a systems issue? It's tough to say. It's just I think it's just a reality of what the budgets have been. If the budgets were healthier, there would have probably been people thinking more along those lines, but it's really, from our analysis, it looks like it's just literally been, we have to do whatever we can on the budgets that we have, and we know we're not doing what the industry kind of best management practices are in every case, in most cases, but we're getting those things we have to get done, at the basic level.
Sure. And I would say that certainly no one can argue with you understanding the challenge that budgets went through a couple of decades or a decade ago when we had budget shortfalls. And certainly as we look at the priorities of those things that we have to pay for in government, unfortunately, trees weren't among those priorities. So obviously you're right on as it relates to our lack of funding. So thank you for the report.
Thank you. What we're hoping, if I may, what we're hoping is that just through understanding the services that trees are providing, that they're real services, that we can measure those now in dollar values, that sort of starts to change the thought process on when budgets get cut, why is urban forestry the one to go when it's providing a return on investment like it is? Maybe that's a priority that needs to be changed.
I think that contributes to the observation and the finding that you have discovered about our lack of knowledge about our inventory as well.
Yes.
So thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Thank you, sir. We have a few speaker cards. We'll go through the speaker cards, and then we'll hear from Mr. Spots and or Mr. Tyson. These, I do my best to take them on hearings such as this in the order in which I received them. Beth McNamara.
Hi, I'll try and go as quick as I can. I'm a 30-year resident, I'm a voter, I'm a homeowner, and most importantly, I am raising two children here. They're 9 and 12. And I did the public survey for DUDEC. I did not find out about it through the city. I found out it through a community organization. This is my third time in chambers about trees. I've not picked up my kids at school to come here. I came here to save the trees on Cherokee. I came here for the DUDEC presentation, and I came today. So I am the resident you would like to clone in order to get this done. I have planted trees in my own parkway. I have reached out to KYCC, and I'm doing a planting in my own neighborhood. I have gone door to door. I know exactly what a diverse neighborhood is saying about trees. The misinformation they got about water, about sidewalks, about the benefits of trees, and it's a hard sell. And I'm going door to door myself to do it with the goal of planting 100 trees in the first quarter of 2019. But I want to give you an example, and I'm going to submit it for the public record, an email that I received in trying to save trees on a median in my neighborhood. There's trees that have died, there's trees that are dying. I said, let's get it done. There's a water main break. Okay, let's get it fixed. The bill came, the estimate. $700,000 to fix a water main on a median. I was like, no wonder we can't get anything done. There's so much bureaucracy and an overrun of costs. So I'm just asking, this is an amazing presentation. I've brought it to my own neighborhood. We have to do something. We can't drag our feet. This is green infrastructure. This is the future of our city. This is a health issue. And for low-income communities, there are people like me and tree cutters who are going out themselves and saying, I'll take care of these 100 trees if you promise not to cut them down. So I beg you, as the board, to really move quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McNamara. Lynette Camp?
Lynette Campy. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Good morning to you all. I'm a member of the Community Forest Advisory Committee. I'm speaking as an individual today because our committee conceptually is thrilled by this process and this report, but we haven't had a chance to review and formally vote on it. I was appointed the CFAC representative to the working group, and although the report speaks to it for itself, I want to stress that it really was a working group, that we'd have 40-some people in a room with a vast amount of expertise and experience. We'd have an introduction, we'd break out into working groups, we'd come back and report to the whole. So we were all active participants contributing to the outcome, guided by the expertise of DUDEC. Something that I don't think has been made crystal clear is that an inventory is the first step, and that an inventory in a way can open a door to additional funding. The CAL FIRE has funding available for urban forest master plans, but they require that a rigorous inventory be in place. That has conditions, size, species, not just location. So that's essential, and that's our next step going forward in order to keep this wonderful momentum going. There are definitely maps I've seen, scary, scary maps that show the reduction in tree density over the years. I can't remember, it was USC that did it, but definitely we've been losing canopy, and primarily in the areas that need it the most. So there is some knowledge about what the impact has been over the last decade or so, but we need the inventory next. With the scary recent data about climate warming, my personal impulse is to want to run out there and start planting trees, but without a roadmap to tell you where you're going, without being able to work in an organized fashion, you're not going to have the results you want. So we do need the Urban Forest Master Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Camp. Hugh Kenny? Hugh Kenny? Oh, there you are, sir.
Yeah, hi, I'm Hugh Kenny. I went to the original DUDAC meeting, and I read 80% of the paper yesterday, and I urge you to back their play. I was disappointed with the survey in that it was very, very timid when it came to one of the big problems for the trees, which is, I guess, public works, because you guys are doing a lot. I mean, LA is famous for taking down 400 trees so they can get the Endeavor to a spot that they wanted. We've been very much too casual about mature trees. Everybody wants to plant trees, and I'm glad we're talking about actually trimming them, but we need to have some emphasis on interfering with public works, interfering with developers. This survey was wise enough to, although they touched upon all these problems, they never, they say, yeah, well, we'll let it go, we'll let it pass. So, I mean, there's always 1,000. Today it's 242 trees sitting on the block waiting to be taken down on the tree removal list. And these are mature trees, and we will rip them out as casually as a cheap dentist will take out a tooth. So by all means, this what you're about to do, the inventory, everything else, is splendid. And I wish you'll do that because it's a start. Maybe we can look around after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Aaron Thomas.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
I'll introduce myself, Aaron Thomas. I'm the newly elected chair for the Community Forest Advisory Committee.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I look forward to working with all of you. I was also the mayor's appointee for CFAC. And I'm a certified arborist, urban forester for 25 years. As my colleague Lynette Campy pointed out, CFAC is in the process now of reviewing this report. So I look forward to checking back in with you after we've had a chance to actually formally vote on it. Of course, what we've seen so far goes very much in hand with what CFAC is involved in, which is the protection of and the enhancement of our city trees. I had a couple of things that I saw in the report that I could point out might be highlighted, and this is something that CFAC has already actively been working towards and brought to, I think, some of your attention over the past years. But I would highlight that while the process is going through with developing an urban forestry management plan, with funding an urban forestry management plan, it's critical that we stay laser focused on the preservation of our urban forest as it is now. That may include enforcing existing ordinances, which, for example, for illegal pruning of trees is an ongoing situation, problem, I would say. Illegal removal of trees. We would love to see, like I said, better enforcement of the existing ordinances so that we don't lose canopy as we go through this long-term process. But I very much look forward to working with you all and meeting the goals of this urban forestry management plan. Just as a quick review, a city is an ecosystem being, living and non-living things together. We're here to protect those living elements, trees, and people. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Yujuan Chen from Tree People. Good morning. Nice to see you again.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yujuan Chen. I'm representing Tree People. I am Senior Manager of Urban Forestry Policy at Tree People. First of all, Tree People applaud City Plan's efforts and for making this first step towards Urban Forestry Management Plan. And we fully support all the priority recommendations in the report because we believe it creates a roadmap for the city of LA to develop a sustainable, healthy, and diverse urban forestry for all. At the same time, we feel strongly there's some immediate action steps for us. Like our colleague pointed out, protecting existing tree by enhancing tree protection ordinances for both publicly owned and privately owned tree, and also to improve tree care for both young tree and mature trees. At the same time, to engage our communities and the general public and to take care of trees in the city. Most importantly, to facilitate integrative interagency collaboration and to enhance public and private partnerships and to help our tree management, planning, and tree care. To further develop and also actually to disseminate the key information from this first step towards Urban Forestry Management Plan report, Tree People and the CFAC, we are co-organizing Rooted in Urban Forestry Day, which will be held on January 23rd in 2019, and to disseminate all the recommendations and to the City Hall, including Mayor's Office, key agencies, and also all the related stakeholders and council offices too. So, as our commissioner, we hope you will speak for our trees and also to make sure all the recommendations being considered and implemented in a timely manner. Thank you very much for your leadership and support.
Thank you, Ms. Chen. Rebecca Stark.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Stark. This is my daughter, Aurora. And excuse me, I feel very emotional about this because I appreciate your work very much today in this report. But I have to say that the experience over the last few years of walking through the city, and we take the bus everywhere, and seeing the trees die, it's devastating. And it's really happening right now. The trees are dying fast. And I started to investigate. I started to realize no one waters the trees. But the city policy is to cut them to the quick. Mike Davis, can you wake up? I know you're sleepy. This is important. The difference between where there's a tree and where there's no tree is the difference between safety and danger. Where there's a big tree, we have shade. It's the difference of 30 or 40 degrees. If you're waiting for the bus and the tree has died, we get sick. We can't take the bus. We have to go home. Our whole system is totally interrupted. So on a microcosm, that's what I've been experiencing. And I started to think, what is going on? I went to our city council's office, and I'm a musician and an artist, and I started talking to my friends and saying, listen, the trees are dying. The city doesn't water them. Nobody knows that the city doesn't water them. They cut them to the quick, and because of the drought, they're dying. So we live in Highland Park. We started going door to door in Highland Park and telling everyone in the Figueroa corridor where there's so much prosperity, hey, did you know the city doesn't water these trees? It's your responsibility. Not one single person knew, not one. So we went into the city council's office and we said, hey, you know the grove of trees in Sycamore Park, they're dying. Sycamore Grove, they're dying. That people would like to help. You know what we were told? There's nothing you can do. We'd like to do something. The public wants to help. The artists want to help. Please, please follow through with this report. Please.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Stark. Jamie Hall.
Good morning. My name is Jamie Hall. I am the president of the Laurel Canyon Association. I'm also on our neighborhood council, Bel Air Beverly Crest Neighborhood Council. I just want to say that this is an exciting opportunity. We can look at this two ways. We can be really depressed that we're at this level, or we can say, wow, the sky's the limit. The sky is really the limit here, and we have so much room for improvement, and we are excited to work with you to achieve something great. And we have the ability to do it. And so I want you to know that the neighborhood associations, the neighborhood councils, the other environmental organizations that are my clients are with you 100% to implement this and to make this a reality. And I hear a lot about educating members of the public that they need to invest in a resource that they have determined is as important as the infrastructure. We want to help you do that. The other thing I just want to point out, this gets a little bit into the weeds here, but 90% of trees are on private property. 90%. So we have to remember that. And yet, most tree cutting is a by right activity. If you don't like that gigantic pine tree, well, you can just get a chainsaw and cut it down. Other cities don't do that. They protect what are called significant trees, regardless of whether or not they're native or not. Right? You have to go and you have to get permission to cut down a tree regardless of whether or not it's native. So we need to update some of our regulations and ordinances in order to protect our urban forest, even those trees that are not protected. And one other thing I want to talk about here is the holistic planning. Right now the city's undergoing brush clearance in hillside communities, and unfortunately I think there's completely inadequate training for the brush clearance companies, and they're cutting down many of our trees in the name of brush clearance. But bottom line is, let's make this happen, and we would like to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. That's all we have for the speaker cards. Our Assistant Director of the Bureau of Street Services is here along with Greg Spots, along with Tim Tyson, our Chief Urban Forester at the Urban Forestry Division. Mr. Spots, just wanted to give you the opportunity to respond to this morning's hearing, as well as talk about what is happening at Urban Forestry now and what could be with some of these key recommendations.
Thank you very much. Our director, Adel Haj Khalil, is very passionate about this topic, and he would be here, except he's in San Francisco on a mission to learn about how they handle homelessness issues today. The Bureau is very supportive of both the final report and the very collaborative process that took place in assembling it. There's lots of components to the urban forest and lots of different entities that are managing different parts, and I think the community of both city agencies, city plants, and outside folks really came together in working with the consultant in a way that we can build on going forward. There's lots of great ideas in the DUDEC report, and many of them are really kind of coherent with and in parallel with our own vision for our agency. Some other aspects of our agency, we have very active inventories and, cloud-based systems to manage them. We have an excellent, system to survey the road surface condition every 3 years and keep that information current in a digital form. And we know how to do that. We just haven't been resourced to do that with the urban forest. And you need not just, a modern cloud-based IT system to keep the information. You need people to collect, analyze, and manage that information. So we need, like we have a pavement management group of people, half a dozen people, we need an urban forest management group in the urban forestry division. Up till now, our rebuilding efforts post-budget crisis have been solely focused on the field people, on the operational side. Actually, in the year that this report has been prepared, a lot of great progress has been made in parallel, and I'd like to just mention a few things. In the summer, the mayor and council authorized 55 new positions in urban forestry, field positions, 4 new tree trimming crews, 1 additional dead tree removal crew, and tree planting, watering, and root pruning crews. And so now, really for the first time in a decade, we will have all the in-house capabilities to do the full set of maintenance activities that the urban forest needs. We won't have as many people as you would need to do even more of it, but we'll have all of the capabilities in-house. And one way we're already putting that into practice under Chief Forester Tim Tyson's leadership is, since the summer, now when we go through a community trimming trees with city forces, we're removing the dead trees as we go and removing stumps as well. When we contracted out that service, that wasn't the case. So the contractor would come, cut some dead wood off a dead tree, and leave that standing trunk there. And now we're taking it out right as we go. There's opportunities right away for us to bring a more holistic approach now that we're doing this with city forces. Also under Tim's leadership, there's a council file that's just now being completed where when someone builds a private residence, if they go to change the position of the driveway, urban forestry will have to check and make sure that a mature street tree isn't at risk of being removed. In the past, that wouldn't come to us until the house was already being built, and at that point, the garage is in a certain place and the driveway needs to go in that place. So we're reforming city processes so that those mature street trees can be protected. That's a very important policy initiative that Tim has drove. Thank you for that, Tim. Also, in November, our agency applied for a grant for the first portion of the funding that we would need to do an inventory. So we just submitted that around Thanksgiving time, and we should hear in the early new year whether that proposal's been looked upon favorably by CAL FIRE. And those are just some of the many initiatives that are underway. And I also would say that Tim and I are really energized under the leadership of our new director, Adel Haj Khalil, who is, one of our nation's experts on clean water and has a really inherent connection with and understanding with sustainability issues. And I'm here to answer any of your questions.
Just a couple of things, Mr. Spots. First of all, I note in the DUDEC report the reference, this is page 45, that urban forestry has been able to root, prune, and retain 80% of the trees impacted by the sidewalk repair program. That's higher than I thought it was, frankly. we see the tree removal requests that have to come to the Board of Public Works, but it is, and we get the quarterly reports as well from Mr. Tyson, but it was a nice reminder that the number is 80%, 85% would be better, 90% would be better than that. But 80% is better than 79, numbers lower than it, and the perception would be that it's not that high. So I appreciate the Bureau's work along with the Bureau of Engineering on that. And really it's a statement, or it's an update that I would like from our Executive Officer, Dr. Campos, just a brief summary of our City Forest Officer. We issued a request for emergency appointment that was issued publicly, correct, Dr. Campos?
That was released on Thursday of last week. We did release the announcement job bulletin on Thursday. That was the 12th, December 12th.
And this is, our City Forest Officer will be, as budgeted, will be housed in the Board of Public Works. However, they will be tasked with managing the urban forest throughout all city departments, including urban forestry at street services, rec and parks for our parks, DWP for dealing with power lines, with fire and dealing with brush clearance, all of that. I think it's tree management coordinator is the idea that's put place in the DUDEC report, but we're calling it City Forest Officer for a number of reasons, but the scope of work is essentially the same. And Dr. Campos, do we have a target hire date?
I was just about to say a little spot out for anyone that's interested in applying for the position, the City Forest Officer. The applications will be accepted all the way through Monday, December 30th, 2018.
Okay, and our target hire
5
date?
p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
I'm sorry?
5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Understood. Our target hire date, though, would be what, end of January?
The goal is to select someone and make an offer by January 17th and have them onboarded by the end of January, early February of 2019.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, we just talked about the report and what a great asset it is to our own growth and development and valuing trees more. And I want to observe, Greg, that over the last year, we have grown tremendously in terms of our relationship with the mayor's office as well as with the city council in terms of them contributing more staff for you to do even more work and have an even greater impact upon the citizenry in the city of Los Angeles. And I do also want to observe that over the years prior to this, we've been doing a lot with a little. And so I agree that as we look at our inventory and being able to assess it, that perhaps we need more resources to do the inventory. Now, in 1996, I talked earlier about the fact that it was mentioned in this report that there has been an assessment, or there was an assessment in 1996. Are we consistently doing an assessment of our inventory right now as we move forward towards growing and developing more? Or how does it work in terms of what we do in terms of assessing our inventory?
Sure. So the inventory that was made was a consultant was hired to go out and look at all the trees, and then all that information was put into a city-created system. And one of the there's two real flaws in that computer system. One is it's only accessible behind a city PC, behind the city's firewall, so you can't access it from the field. And the whole point of a living cloud-based inventory is you do some work on some trees out in the field, and your staff uses their tablets to input what they did. But this current system doesn't support mobile devices. And secondly, it doesn't have GIS. It doesn't have a latitude and longitude geographic location of the tree. And that's really essential for modern, online maps and all the things that you want to do, where you use spatial analysis and your unit is having a GIS location of the tree. And so there is information in this legacy system called Urban Forestry Management System. There is information newer than 1996, but not really within the last 3 to 5 years. So it isn't that no information got collected since that first inventory, but not all the information that was collected out in the field ended up in the system, partly because, the division didn't have any clerical staff, and you have to be behind a city PC to update it. So we're very passionate about having a modern cloud-based inventory that's mobile friendly. We already have mobile devices in the hands of our supervisors out in the field, and that's how we're able to pick up tree emergencies within 3 working days. We're very proud of that. We have a paperless process for handling tree emergencies. We make a first response within 24 hours, and we clean them up in an average of 3 working days or less. And that's because we've digitized that process. And so it'll be very important to now digitize our ability to make observations in the field and update the inventory as we travel around the city.
Great. I think we realize that trees help improve the quality of life. We talked about in the earlier conversation about our lack of knowledge, or the general lack of knowledge about the value of trees. I think one thing is for sure, that when the mayor talks about sustainability and his back to basic principles, nothing could be much more supportive and enhancing the value of trees than the research that we have before us today. And so I think in many ways it reflects his values in terms of his leadership on sustainability, and even more important, I think that as a result of not only the findings, but some of the implications from those findings, is that it will certainly enhance what you do and what you have been doing, again, with less. You've been doing a very, very lot. You've been doing very much with less. And, again, we've gained support and additional staff that we're in the process of hiring, and then add that to this. And then we're really going to accent how important trees really are, not only just based upon our philosophy and our leadership principles, but we're getting ready to do it with the necessary resources if we follow this plan. So I do want to, at the same time, thank you for what you have been doing, holding the fort in an environment which has been revealed as lackluster in terms of what we should be doing from policy. So again, I am certainly appreciative of what you and what our Urban Forestry Division has done thus far. And I look forward to looking to support this project, because I believe the research will help bring more importance to urban forestry.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Commissioner Cabello?
Thank you, President James. Just a quick question on the motion you referenced earlier regarding the driveway and the planning process. Who's the author of the motion?
Tim, do you know that?
Or council file number?
We can get that to you
Can
right
you,
after
please?
the meeting.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Jacinto.
Perfect segue, Commissioner Cabello, because I was going to, first of all, thank Greg, your presence, and Tim's presence on behalf of Adele, and touting his leadership and his energy, because that's what we see, and we're really excited. And I was going to pick up on that, because if you've been in our boardroom for the last couple of years, you'll understand the most contentious and the most involved citizenry and advocacy has been about tree removals in private property. So Tim, thank you for your championship, because I remember, I believe it was former Commissioner Repenning who championed that, to say, can we do something on the front end so that a project doesn't get out of planning and then we have to talk about it. It should be vetted if there is a policy to be able to preserve canopy on a private property at the planning stage. So Tim, thank you for your leadership in getting that done. I'd like to learn about that too as well, so we can see how we could do more preservation, whether it's the planning side on development or the sidewalk repair program. We've had some input from our citizen teams that would like to see how we can save healthy trees on our sidewalk repair program as it's part of the Willits. So every opportunity we have, and I believe it was Mr. Thomas who mentioned we should be, as we move forward with the plan, we should be trying to preserve as much. So let's look at all the different pockets to see how we could keep and preserve the integrity. So thank you both.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacinto. The oral report will be received. I've got a motion that I want to read into the record that I'll provide to Dr. Campos on this item. Whereas trees are an integral part of our streets, ecosystem, urban forests, and the environment, whereas trees provide cleaner air and combat climate change by reducing air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, Whereas trees reduce urban heat island effect by providing shade to our pedestrians. Whereas trees capture, clean, and store rainwater, reducing flooding and water consumption. Whereas trees improve public and mental health in our neighborhoods by reducing pollution and heat exposure, providing calming effect and increasing walking opportunities. And whereas City Plants has just released a report entitled, quote, First Step for Developing an Urban Management Plan for the City of Los Angeles, end quote. The report outlines key elements for developing a comprehensive and strategic urban forest management plan. I therefore, and I'm seconded by Commissioner Cabello, direct the Bureau of Street Services to work with all of the bureaus of the Department of Public Works, this is number one, to develop a documented process to first identify healthy trees that may be at risk of removal from a city construction project, and secondly, review and evaluate mitigation options to preserve in place these healthy trees. Second, direct the Bureau of Street Services to work with the City Forest Officer and the Community Forest Advisory Council on organizing an LA Tree Summit in 2019 that builds on the recently published City Plants report entitled, quote, First Step for Developing an Urban Management Plan for the City of Los Angeles, end quote. The Tree Summit shall include community stakeholders, environmental advocates, tree experts, sister agencies, and representatives from other cities to share best practices and review and recommend policies and practices. Third, direct the Bureau of Street Services to work with the City Forest Officer to develop a work plan to implement an urban forest and tree assessment management system. Four, direct the Bureau of Street Services to work with the City Forest Officer to develop a work plan to implement and complete a tree inventory. And fifth, report back on the motion with 120 days. While it's got my signature and Commissioner Cabello's second, I obviously will entertain additional seconds by our colleagues if they desire, like Commissioner Jacinto, Davis, and Garcia, so we can sign that and submit it to Dr. Campos. That'll be the order on the motion as well. So thank you, everyone, for your assistance on agenda item number 10 and your participation today.
Mr. President, can I have that motion go forthwith?
Yes, forthwith on the motion. Thank you. Agenda item number 1, Bureau of Engineering, Task Order Solicitation number 00121, AECOM Technical Services in Council District 11, recommending that the board authorize the city engineer to issue a revision to the task for solicitation number 00121 to AECOM Technical Services, increasing the budget authority from $200,000 to $440,000 for continued soil remediation and groundwater monitoring and related services. Mr. Mulhern on number 1.
Good morning. I'm Mike Mulhern, Bureau of Engineering, the Geotechnical Engineering Division. I have 3 similar items, and I was asked by Commissioner Jacinto to provide a small overview of the underground tank remediation program, especially since we have some new commissioners.
Yes,
so
please.
With your permission, I'll start with that. I was also asked to show a few more examples, so I brought some handouts later that we'll get into individually for each of the sites. We call it the UST program, but the CAO calls it the Underground Tank Contaminated Soil Removal and Mitigation Fund. We spend between $1 and $2 million a year to clean up leaks from former fuel tanks at various city-owned sites. We do both groundwater and soil remediation. Just a very brief regulatory background. In 1984, at the federal level, there was an increased focus on underground tanks, starting with the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA as we know it, and also its solid and hazardous waste amendments, basically directing the national EPA to regulate all aspects of underground tanks. There were 2 upshots of that we're concerned about. They wanted them to be double-walled, so there's a secondary containment in case they leak, as we're finding out that more than half of them leaked with time. Fuels, waste oil, things like that. It also got the state active in the mid-1980s. They started what's called Title 23 of the CCRs, or the California Code of Regulations.
And just so we're clear, Mr. Mulhern, as you mentioned, this is for items, you're here on 1, 2, and 3.
Correct.
So go ahead.
Yeah, they're very similar items. They're all
Got it.
involving soil and groundwater remediation.
Just some different monetary amounts depending on the council office.
correct.
Yeah, or council district. Go ahead.
But I'm just giving an overview of why this money we spend disappears. You don't
Right.
see it because we're not building the structure, but it's required by these various state and federal laws.
Okay.
Another is the Title 22 of the CCRs, which involves the Health and Safety Code and the Porter-Cologne Water Quality Control Act. They also set up the regional boards. The state set up several regional boards, and we report to the Los Angeles Regional Quality Control Board, and they're our regulator on almost all of these sites. There was a city team formed in the 80s to renegotiate or to add new fuel tanks and upgrade them. It included the BOE mostly. The architectural division was the PM and designed things. We in Geotech found a clean location for the new tanks and also any remediation that's required. We took that over. Of course, General Services was involved at these meetings because they were the site owners. Con Ed was there for removals of contaminated and so on. We had at one time 250 sites, or 250 yards with over 525 underground tanks. And General Services in 1998, the Fleet Re-Engineering Division was tasked to decrease that number because just to make it more manageable. So they went from 250 sites down to about 136. And then with various bond issues, fire and police bond over the next few years, that number crept up to about 150 today. So at one time, there were 250 city sites, 525 tanks. About a third of those leaked. Approximately 180 sites were deemed by the fire inspector at the time to be too contaminated to just ignore. So we did site assessments, and we've achieved approximately 170 case closures. In other words, the site was considered adequately addressed either through risk assessment, which I'll get into in a few minutes, or other remediation. So we're left with 10 sites right now out of the original 250. So about 4% of the sites are more complicated or refractory, and we're still working on those. You see 7 of those sites between myself and Mr. Price. 3 others were using city forces to do minor soil analysis. The modes of remediation are varied depending on the depth and the type of soil and the type of contamination. Most sites were closed using site assessment, risk assessment, or minor excavation. We've done quite a few of those. We've also closed several sites using soil vapor extraction. That's basically where we drill a number of vacuum type wells and put a vacuum on the system, bring up the vapors and run them through various cleaning devices. We don't have any active right now for the BOE, but sanitation has one that we're advising them on. You don't see it because it comes to a different fund. We also use what's called in situ bioventing. In situ just means in place. And basically what we're doing is sort of the opposite of vapor extraction. We're pumping air down and stimulating the natural soil microorganisms, chiefly bacteria, to consume the hydrocarbons. And the Venice site, we'll get into that a little more because that's one of those. We've also used oxygen release compound in socks. It's basically a toothpaste-like structure where we put in a large fabric sock-like device and put that into the groundwater, and that releases oxygen that stimulates both the breakdown of the hydrocarbons and also the bugs down there. We've done several with quantitative risk analysis, which we use EPA sanctioned models, computer models, to show that, okay, there is some contamination there. It's slightly above action levels, but it's either so deep or there are clay layers separating it that it's not required to remediate it this time. And then sometimes we add that technique to site capping. In other words, we cap the site with an impermeable asphalt or concrete like we did at asphalt plant number 1 years ago and got case closure that way. It just wasn't feasible to dig up the whole site. Sometimes we do what's called limited skimming and quarterly monitoring, where we're just skimming off any free product, that is fuel that's floating on the surface, and also monitoring or studying any dissolved hydrocarbons in the water and a lot of times those will just asymptotically go to zero. So without doing a big expensive dig and haul or remediation system, we can get to case closure that way. Okay, the first site we'll talk about is Venice. I'd like to increase the budget by $240,000 this year, and this is a bioventing system. Now, I apologize, these slides that I handed out are a little out of order. I didn't know which you were going to take first. If you go to the second to the last full page, there's a black and white cross-sectional diagram. And as you know, a cross-section is if we were dug a great big trench and we're kind of standing looking in at the underground features. The ground surface you can see by the solid line at the top, and then there are two penetrating wells. One is injecting air and the other is monitoring. And at the surface, there's a very small blower. It's about this size, very out of the way and obtrusive, so that way we're not interfering with sites. A lot of our sites were former fire stations and police stations, and they didn't have a lot of room for us to do a lot of bric-a-brac at the surface. So I love this little low-tech method. It's cheap and it's not obtrusive, but basically what we do is just inject air, which has oxygen, into the soil, and the bugs are stimulated by that, and they help break down the hydrocarbons. Especially works on diesel and waste oil, which we have here at the Venice Yard. ACOM bi-weekly visits the site to adjust the system, make sure it's running okay. And they also do respiration tests a couple times a year where they basically monitor the oxygen utilization. They measure oxygen going in, CO2, and hopefully not, but whatever VOCs come out, sometimes there's a little of that, so they monitor those as a respiration test. So that's part of the cost. Basically, the expenditure is about the same as last year. I've increased the contingency a little bit because as we get closer towards possible case closure, sometimes we get a notification from the regional board, go ahead and do what's called rebound testing or confirmation testing, and that means we have to go drill some more boring. So I put that in the budget so there's no time delay if we get that sort of a notice. And the business inclusion program is a little low right now because mostly it's ACOM using its own forces to do this monitoring. As we do more of the confirmation samples with actual drilling and sampling, then we can use the participation level should increase. Their total pledge is pretty good. So that's basically the Venice Yard.
Okay, so let's take number one. And those MBE, WBE numbers pledged are 14.67% MBE, 6.45% WBE on number one.
Yes.
Any questions on number one, Commissioner Cento?
Thank you, President James. Michael, I just want to thank you for providing this overview of the program that you periodically come like once or twice a year to ask us. Especially appreciate the use of expanding the acronyms to see what they mean, like UST and RAP is not Recreation and Parks, it's a Remedial Action Plan, and now we understand what MPETS is, and so that system is very valuable. Thank you. So there are no questions, maybe.
Got one potentially from Commissioner Garcia. We'll start with her.
Thank you, President James. My question is, it looks like we're doubling our budget amount. Is that right?
Approximately. Every year I have to come to a new, ask for another amount. The CAO only gives us 1 year at a time, so every year the amount is about the same unless I have to do more. So it looks like it's doubling, but basically it's a kind of a routine increment of work this year.
Annual amount.
And how many more years do we expect to continue to monitor the soil?
That's a good question because we have two uncertainties. We have the regulatory agencies. Sometimes when we think we're almost done and we ask for case closure, no, you guys have a lot more work. Other times we're working along and they say, well, this is ready for case closure, do your confirmation samplings and let's be done with it. So they're not always predictable. Then we also have just the response of the soil. So the soil is not uniform. There's clay layers, silt layers sometimes, and we can't always predict. But I would say a rough estimate would be 2 or 3 more years at this particular site.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you for that. I just want to see if there's a way that we can kind of come to a settlement or a conclusion and not have to do this every year. I know that's coming and coming. But do they send us kind of a punch list or things we have to do to make this, get us to a soil that we're okay with and they're okay with?
Not per se. They read our quarterly or semi-annual submittals, and if they see something that's amiss or an opportunity to give us case closure, they will contact us. So I understand the frustration, and we'd like to get some of these done too.
Right.
Fortunately, at this site, as I say, we have a very small motor. The price is very inexpensive. There's always the possibility we could just go in and dig it all out, but then we'd shut down the yard, expose the neighborhood to fumes and dust, and then also it would cost quite a bit more. So, I mean, that could happen if we were ever directed to it, but our approach at Geotech is to be conservative and not spend a lot of money, not disrupt the site, but on the other hand, make sure that the receptors, that is the people at the surface, the neighborhood and so on, are not impacted, their health is not impacted.
Right, that's our first priority. Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So Commissioner Cento has a motion on agenda item number 1. I'll second it. Any objection? Without objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 1. Any issue sending number 1 forthwith? We'll send number 1 forthwith. Mr. Mulhern is here on number 2 as mentioned. Council District 8, Task Order Solicitation 00016, AECOM Technical Services again. Recommending that the board authorize the city engineer to issue a revision to the task for solicitation number 00016 to AECOM Technical Services, increasing the budget authority from $275,000 to $625,000 for continued groundwater remediation, groundwater monitoring, and related services. Mr. Mulhern, anything substantive on number 2 that you didn't cover in number 1?
Yes, quite a bit, now that you asked. Let's go to the first part of this handout. This was a handout I prepared a couple years ago for a delegation of visiting Chinese scientists who came to learn how the city handles remediation, and Mr. Doty and I spent the morning with a oral presentation, slides and so on, and then I put together an afternoon field trip to the Southwest Yard, so that's what some of these slides are here. And I'm not going to go through them all. I realize that we have a short bit of time, but I did want to show you on the third page is the site map, kind of showing where the site is. It's the air photo. Right in the middle of the site, you see the Home Depot in Chesterfield Square. So we're just to the east, or I'm sorry, to the west or the left of that, south of Slauson. And there are residents in the neighborhood, and that's one reason we've been a little more aggressive at this site to make sure the contamination plumes don't enter the residential neighborhoods. The next page is this cross-section again. Geologists love cross-sections. And again, if we were standing at the surface, you would just see large tanks and so on. But what we're doing is under the ground surface, the extraction well, we're pulling down the groundwater. You can see the dash line, it's called static water table. That's where the groundwater would be if there was no action going on. It's about 20 feet deep in this location. But what we're doing is applying a vacuum to that, and we're depressing. It's called a cone of depression, and we're depressing what's called the saturated zone, bringing that down. So we're sucking in the water. Now the contamination generally is near the top of the water, but it also gets into the soil just above it. So we're also adding a vacuum to the soil itself, bringing in soil vapor, bringing that to the surface and treating them both. And if you skip ahead to what's called figure 11, it shows the cleanup a little better. Figure 11 is called remediation flow diagram.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, basically we have 9 wells. We're sucking out both water and soil in the contaminated zone. The upper flow there shows the gas flow. Basically there's a knockout for particulates and things like that. And there's a blower, and we send them through 3 large 1,000-pound carbon vessels. These are granulated activated carbon vessels, and those clean out the vapor contaminants, mostly VOCs, and then advance to the atmosphere under an AQMD permit.
The other flow down below is water. Basically, we're taking all that water, and you can see the next page is the water tank. It looks sort of like when I used to brew beer, but it's basically the dirty water with contamination floating on top. That we send to a recycling facility. They take water that has hydrocarbons, they separate it, they can use the hydrocarbons as fuel. I'm not sure if it's in ships or whatever, and then they also can put the water back into some kind of a recycling system. So the very last page there just shows the large tank, the large water tank, and then these 3 small activated charcoal filters. Now, we also have to provide the regional board what's called a semi-annual site conceptual model. Seem to want to see one. I told them it was a very thick document. This is double-sided, very small print. And if you'd like a copy, I'll leave it with you here. This has to be submitted to the state, so I always get what's called the geo-tracker confirmation to make sure that the URS has actually submitted it. I have that on top. But it's a very thick, dense document. It makes great bathtub reading. Let me summarize it real quickly for you. It basically takes all the information that we know from the site, previous history, all our lithology from the wells, all the lab data from URS and even previous contractors. They do a QA, QC, make sure everything is right. And they basically come up with a very technical model to show that the most dangerous compounds, in this case it happens to be MTBE. It's a solution that was used for a while in gasoline, and there's a little bit of that left. But they do this model to make sure that MTBE does not exceed 5 parts per billion at any time, and it will not get to the surface at all. So basically this thick document makes sure that the remediation system is continually working properly. And they come to conclusions, basically, and this addresses the commissioner's question there. They recommend, and this is something that we have to agree with, we being Geotech and AECOM, we sit down and say, is this what we really want to say? But they recommend the continuation of remediation and monitoring until free product stabilization occurs at the site. And at that time, we'll ask for case closure, and then we have to do the continual confirmation samples. So getting back to the actual request, it's for an increase of $350,000. Now, most of that goes into my contingency again. The actual amount that I'm spending this year, the actual NTP is very similar to last year, but we didn't have much of a contingency, so I'm increasing the contingency to 13% this year, which is reasonable if we have to do some more confirmation samples. Basically, that's all I had, other than, again, the participation levels are a little low because it's in-house monitoring and the study that they do, and we can increase that as they always do toward the end of their contract, using lab and drilling for when we do increased drilling confirmation.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mulhern. Any questions beyond what's been asked on number 2? Commissioner Sentos made a motion that we adopt agenda item number 2. I'll second it along with Commissioner Garcia. Any objection? Without objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 2. Any issue sending number 2 forthwith? We'll send number 2 forthwith. Number 3, Council District 5, Task Order Solicitation 96-060. This one's for Tetra Tech Incorporated, recommending that the board authorize the city engineer to issue a revision to the task for solicitation number 96-060 to Tetra Tech Incorporated, increasing the budget authority from $143,035 to $253,035, about $110,000, for continued groundwater monitoring and related services, and which includes contingency. Again, Mr. Mulhern, anything substantive you haven't covered on 1 and 2, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to show where it is. On the last page of the handouts, there's a map showing its location near the 110 and the 105. And then at the very end, there's a picture of it from Google Earth. It's the brown lot in the middle of the site. It's about 10 acres, and it was slated several times for a high-tech workforce training hybrid. In other words, they were going to have a battery plant there for cars for a while, and also have training related to some of the local schools. And unfortunately, the private developer, in at least 3 times that I've been working on this site, has either pulled out or gone bankrupt or something. That's the financial problems. So we still have the site. We're still responsible for it. It's a former Caltrans site. We being the Bureau of Engineering, we did install this Clovis Street cul-de-sac in anticipation of building on the site. Again, there's sensitive receptors in the area, including residents, so we don't want any contamination to get off the site. We have, through the previous contract, the technology we're using is called hydrogen releasing compound, using direct push. In other words, we just kind of like inoculation. We gave the ground shots through these direct injection wells of a hydrogen releasing compound, and it appears to be working. It's a little slower than we'd hope, but it is working, and now there's no immediate need to get case closure, even though we always said that we'll work with any developer. We won't get in their way. They can do whatever they want, and we'll put in any new wells that we have to. The amount of NTP is very similar to last year. To date, the BIP is a little short. It wasn't in the report here, but we've only gotten about $23,000 worth of invoices so far, and that includes about 3.2% of Belshore as the WBE, and about $5,700 from American Environmental Testing, and that comes out to about 24%. So we're a little short there. Again, once we get marching orders from the regional board and can do more drilling and sampling, those participation levels will increase.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Mulhern on number 3? Commissioner Santos made a motion that we adopt agenda item number 3, seconded by Commissioner Davis. Any objection? Thank you, sir. Without objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 3. Agenda item number 4, project labor agreements, Council District 11 for Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant. For the Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant primary tanks B0, B5, and CO, C0, I guess. Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant primary tanks skimmer improvements, and Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant primary influent sluice gates. Interesting. Mr. Kanagawa.
Good morning, President James, Commissioners, Bureau Representatives, Mr. City Attorney, and Mr. Executive Officer. My name is Dale Kanagawa from the Bureau of Contract Administration. I am here with a project labor agreement request for the projects just mentioned. There were actually 3 separate projects, with one being on the initial, what we call the PIPS list, that was already listed to have a project labor agreement. They were going to combine 3 projects, so we want to make this combined project have a PLA for all 3 parts of it. Initially, it was the primary tank skimmer improvements project that was listed on the Public Infrastructure Project Series, otherwise known as the PIPS list. The Hyperion water treatment projects are all located at 12,000 Vista Del Mar and Playa del Rey, 90293 zip code. City engineer has estimated total construction cost to be roughly $19.6 million. However, it was advised that approximately half, or $9.5 million, of the estimate is for equipment. The primary tank skimmer improvements portion of the combined project will update the scum collection system on primary battery A, primary battery B, and C by replacing helical skimmers with new loop chain and flight skimmers with all associated assemblies. The project will also remove and replace 12 long sludge collectors and 4 cross sludge collectors. The primary tanks upgrade, battery 0, battery 5, and channel 0 portion of the combined projects will improve sludge conveyance systems in primary battery B, tank B0 and B5, and primary battery C. It's also going to remove 6 sludge pumps and procure and install 6 new sludge pumps with new valves, piping, and associated motor control centers. Additionally, 9 slide gates will be removed and replaced. Project will also remove and replace 1 influent scum trough slide gate. Scope of work also includes removal and replacement of 9 long sludge gate collectors. And finally, the third piece of the project, influent sluice gates portion. It's going to replace or demolish 7-foot by 7-foot sluice gates and associated assemblies in primary battery A, replace them with bulkheads. Existing corroded bulkheads and associated guides will be removed and replaced. The PVC liner along the edges of primary battery A will be repaired as well. The Department of Public Works Project Labor Agreement and Public Infrastructure Stabilization Policy provides numerous benefits for the city. It will ensure quality work is completed on time and within budget, ensure work is done safely by utilizing skilled workers with a commitment to training, facilitating an orderly settlement of labor disputes without strikes or other stoppages. Previously completed projects of varying types and sizes covered on past PLAs have created an average of 13 jobs per $1 million project cost. The estimated cost of this project, including half of the value for equipment. So based on that, we're saying it roughly could potentially create 131 jobs. Adding the PLA to this project will ensure that the construction work includes targets for local hire, local apprentices, and transitional individuals. And these efforts will be monitored by the Bureau of Contract Administration. Our staff recommends that a PLA be part of this combined project.
Great, thank you, sir. Comprehensive enough for me. Any questions? Then I'll make a motion that we adopt agenda item number 4, seconded by Commissioner Cabello and Commissioner Garcia. Any objection? With that objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 4. Thank you, sir. Any issue sending number 4 forthwith? We'll send number 4 forthwith. Number 5, subcontractor substitution for the Police Construction Incorporated, or PULIC, P-U-L-I-C, PULIC. Oh, well, however, it's police, Commissioner Davis? Okay, but it's spelled P-U, not P-O. Recommending that the board concur. What? Oh. Recommending that the board, I always enjoy when I have a sense of humor and when I don't realize it. Concur with the action of Commissioner Davis approving the request of this construction company for the subcontractor substitution of Hardy and Harper Incorporated with Calmex Engineering for asphalt concrete paving work on the Soto Street Bridge over Valley Boulevard and Union Pacific Railroad. This is a federal project. Mr. Espindola.
Good afternoon. George Spindola with the Bureau of Contract Administration. The Bureau received a request on September 28, 2018 from Police Construction Incorporated to substitute their approved subcontractor, Hardy and Harper Inc., OBE contractor, for asphalt concrete paving with Calmex Engineering Incorporated, another OBE contractor. Hardy and Harper objected to this substitution. A hearing was held on November 15, 2018 with Commissioner Davis. Based on the facts presented at this hearing, the substitution is recommended. The list amount of Hardy and Harper was $466,424. Calmex Engineering will perform the work for $470,173, a difference of $3,749. Police Construction will decrease its participation by $3,749. Therefore, this substitution is at no cost to the city. The Bureau concurs with the recommendation of Commissioner Davis to approve the substitution.
Any questions on agenda item number 5? Commissioner Davis has made the motion. I'll second it. Any objection? With that objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 5. Any issue sending number 5 forthwith? We'll send number 5 forthwith.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Agenda item number 6, Council District 6 Fund Substitution. The Van Nuys Fire Station 39 project, recommending that the board approve the substitution of $4,448,900 from Fund number 298, Department number 50, Appropriation Unit 50 NPAT to Fund number 16D, Department number 50, Appropriation Unit 50Y059. And direct the Office of Accounting to expedite all required accounting transactions. Ms. Andelon.
Good afternoon. My name is Mercedes Andelon. I'm with the Bureau of Engineering, the Homeless Facilities Division. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I'm going to be covering items 6, 7, and 8. Item 6 is regarding the substitution of Municipal Improvement Corporation of Los Angeles funds for general obligation funds, also known as GOB funds, for Fire Station 39. The project was initially funded with bond funding approved by the voters in 2002. However, the City Administrative Officer instructed the Bureau to substitute funding with MECLA funds when they opted to defease the funds. They later instructed the Bureau of Engineering to substitute a portion with general obligation funds with the expectation that we would expend those funds first. Due to recent policy changes, the CAO has now instructed the Bureau to substitute the MECLA funds with the GOB funds, therefore freeing up the MECLA funds for other projects. So I therefore recommend that the board approve the substitution of MECLA funds with GOB funds.
Thank you, Ms. Andelon. I just have two questions for people here at the table, one for Dr. Campos and one for Mr. Jordan. Dr. Campos, for your accounting purposes work with the Office of Accounting, everything okay with this?
This is actually a great thing for us. This is one of the reasons why sometimes bills do not get paid, because there are changes in funding mixes. So this motion, or the series of motions that are before you today, will allow us to pay our bills and make those payments to the vendor for DC.
Great, thank you. Mr. Jordan, okay with you from the legal perspective?
Yes, I enthusiastically agree with the executive officer.
Great, I knew the answer to that question, but I'd like the oral report to reflect it. Is there a motion? By Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Cabello. Any objection? With that objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 6. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, item number 7
I'll
is...
get to that one in 1 second. Any issue sending number 6 forthwith? We'll send number 6 forthwith. Agenda item number 7, Fund Substitution North Central Animal Services Center Phase 2 Project, recommending that the board approve the substitution of $17 million in MECLA funds from Fund number 298, Department number 50, Appropriation Unit number 50, NPAV, to Fund at number 15T, Department number 50, Appropriation Unit 50V323, and Fund number 16D, Department number 50, Appropriation Unit number 50Y059, and request the Office of Accounting to effect all required accounting transactions. Ms. Andelon on number 7.
Okay, similar to number 6, this is North Central Animal Services Center project, and again, this was to be funded with the bond proceeds, with bond funding approved by the voters in 2002. However, the CAO instructed the Bureau to substitute a portion of the funding with MECLA funds when they opted to defease the bonds. Now, recent policy changes, the CAO has instructed us to substitute the MECLA funds with the GOB funds. I therefore recommend that the board approve the substitution of MECLA funds with GOB funds.
Okay, any questions? Thank you. Same, just for the record, again, Dr. Campos and Mr. Jordan, your answers would be the same?
Same answers, yes.
Okay. Yes. Commissioner Sindel's made a motion on number 7, seconded by Commissioner Davis. Any objection? Without objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 7. Any issues sending number 7 forthwith? We'll send number 7 forthwith. Ms. Andelon, you're here on number 8. Council Districts 2 and 15. Revised Task Order Solicitation number 41. Gonzalez Goodell Architects Homeless Facilities Program. Recommending that the board approve the revision of the Council District number 2 Navigation Center Project account number 1 ORHAV to number 1 ORHAS as in Sam, and Council District number 15 Storage Center Project account number ORAHS to 1 ORHAV. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, this motion before you is to request to approve the revision of funding information that was incorrectly listed in the board report from October 7, 2018. I do want to make a correction to the agenda. It should be account number 10 RHAV to 10 RHAS, and the same with district number 15. Should be account number 10 RHAS to 10 RHAV.
Okay. Any questions? Dr. Campos and Mr. Jordan, all good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. That's a motion from Commissioner Cinto, seconded by Commissioners Cabello and Davis. Any objection? Without objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 8.
Mr.
Any
President, on
issues?
item number 8, if I can just
That's
ask
amended.
for it as amended, thank you.
Yeah, as amended by the presenter.
Yes, thank you.
Any issue sending number 8 forth? Well, first of all, any objection on number 8 as amended? Without objection on number 8 as amended, it's passed. Any issue sending 8 as amended forthwith? We'll send it forthwith as amended. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Agenda item number 9, oral report construction of public buildings and open space program update from the Bureau of Engineering. Ms. Weintraub, thank you for your patience. Long meeting today.
Good afternoon, Deborah Weintraub, Chief Deputy City Engineer of the Bureau of Engineering. So I don't have someone here with me to run the slides, but you all have in front of you, or I gave to Dr. Campos handouts, which he'll pass around. But I'll just use the handouts. Let me wait 1 minute. So in the package that Dr. Campos is giving you, you have a board that the Architecture Division produced, which is we've printed for you at large scale, and it's a timeline of recent projects. I'm not going to go through that because it represents some of the older projects, but it just gives you a perspective on some of the work that our Architectural Division and Bureau of Engineering complete. I'm going to go to the one-page project summary sheets and just give you a quick update on these sheets. First of all, I'm going to start with the Boyle Heights Sports Center Gymnasium, which is a new gymnasium that is in design. We're working very closely with the Council Office and Department of Recreation and Parks. The General Manager of Rec and Parks anticipates that there will be a lot more funding coming into his projects. So we've been working with him on expanding the spaces for gymnasiums. The basic gymnasium space won't change, but he's looking for more ancillary spaces.
This is cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
I like it. Thank you, Deb. Go ahead.
So I had it printed large for you so you could read it.
Yeah, yeah.
And, put it on your wall, decorate the halls, whatever. Anyway, what's interesting about the Boyle Heights Sports Center Gymnasium project is that it's on Whittier Boulevard, and so it has a street frontage on a street that's becoming increasingly pedestrian and commercial. So there was a lot of discussion just about how to have the gymnasium project both meet the street, and then there's a big drop off in the land to come to the open space. That project is in design. The next project is the Pershing Square. We've been working for approximately the last year with the design competition winners for Pershing Square to come up with a way to do the project, maintain the radical flatness idea, which was part of the winning competition entry, but do it in a way that would not be as costly and would also not eliminate the whole top floor of parking under the park, which represents a significant income stream for Rec and Parks. We have finished that work. We're now going into, I imagine I'll be back in front of you with a kind of first phase project which will address doing 2 of the edges because we don't have the money to do the entire park right now. Again, we've worked very closely with Rec and Parks on this. The next project, which is labeled Rumblefish, which is not really the title of it, it's the Taylor Yard Pedestrian and Bicycle Bridge. The architects gave it that name. It is a bridge at Taylor Yard G2, which is a major project of the city that the Bureau is involved with. This bridge has been awarded. It is technically in construction. All that we're doing right now, though, is exchanging information with the contractor because we can't start construction physically till April 15th when we're allowed back in the river. The next project is Council District 8, we've completed the exterior the exterior building repairs. They had some mold issue and water seepage issues. This just gives you a rendering of some of the interior renovations that will start shortly. We're waiting for the council district field office staff to be moved out to a swing facility. Highland Parks Junior Art Center is a Proposition K project where we're taking an old tilt-up warehouse and turning it into a junior art center. This is very early in design and schematic design at this point with a consulting architecture firm. Next one, Van Ness Pool and Bathhouse. We continue our effort to do pool projects for Rec and Parks. I imagine over the next 5 years there will be quite a few pool projects. This project was designed in-house and is in construction. I had to include, though you've seen before, because it's such a fabulous photograph, the Hay Rookie Pool down in Council District 15. I don't know who took this from a helicopter, but that pool, it's got to be the most beautiful setting of any pool in the city and is actively being used. The next project is a homeless facility project. It's a navigation center. It's not part of the temporary bridge housing. It's in construction. It's using prefab buildings. It's a facility that homeless people can come to store their belongings, also to get services, to take showers and that sort of thing. South Park renovations we're doing in phases. It's a park that has a lot of historical elements to it, and we're currently in construction on a maintenance yard area, and we will continue to work on this park. The First and Broadway Park, I know that last Friday, erroneously in a briefing package, you were shown that we have a shortfall in funding for this project. We're in the process of value engineering on this project. We'll be back in late January to give you an update. We're working very closely with the general manager of Rec and Parks. There is a shortfall of approximately $8 million on this project. Algin Sutton Pool.
Is it a shortfall?
Of approximately $8 million. And that is well known around the city, the mayor's office, the CAO, Rec and Parks.
Okay.
But we'll be back to brief you.
Okay. Any grant opportunities to shore that up?
You know, Rec and Parks hasn't mentioned grant opportunities to us. They are talking about adding additional Quimby funds to the project.
Okay.
Algin Sutton Pool, another pool project, is also in construction. And then if you flip that over, you have a rendering that was done when we did the EIR for the Los Angeles Street Civic Building. It doesn't represent the project design. As you all know, this is a P3 effort, and we're in the midst of developing a request for qualification and request for proposal documents for a new 27-odd story office building at the Parker Center site.
This is just to show that there will be something in the space.
Something in the space,
right.
Yes. And then lastly, the last 2 pages, we have an ongoing effort for the last couple of years to replace planting at libraries with drought-tolerant landscaping. We've been doing this work in-house, and this just shows you some of the plant palettes and landscape plans that we've been working on. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Deborah, this is, I am going to see if this can go on my wall.
Great.
It would really be cool to get it framed. I'm sure there's a cost for that. Any questions for, we'll start with Commissioner Jacinto for Ms. Weintraub.
Thank you, President James. Deborah, thank you for this great report. You know, we were just at the tower on last Thursday where you spoke, and Councilman Harris Dawson was there, and he sang the praises of the architectural division in terms of providing great projects to our city partners, whether it's the Recreation and Parks, to the council offices. And so whether it's a bridge or a building or an open space, you know, that's what we have come to expect is great service, great partnership from the Bureau of Engineering Architectural Division. So thank you for your leadership. All these projects are transformative. First on Broadway, the Los Angeles Streets Civic Building are absolutely transformative for our Civic Center core. And it's through your folks' leadership and integrative, connective leadership we're able to do this. So proceed on. Thank you very much for the report.
Commissioner Jacinto, it is our honor to be able to work on these projects. Every day it is my honor to be able to work on these.
Thank you, Deborah. Commissioner Davis.
Yes, I want to just thank you for these projects as well. And obviously, again, these projects improve the quality of life for all of our citizens in the various communities where they will be erected. In terms of the First and Broadway Park, this is the one across the street from Bank of America. Are we open to private funding, or do we pursue that as well as we do the public bonding money as well?
No, the First and Broadway
First and
Park
Broadway is right out here.
It's right over here next to Grand Park.
Right.
It's right across from the old Times, LA
You
Times
said there was
building.
a financial shortfall.
Yes. So one of the things that we're talking about is there are what we're calling the poppies, which are these sort of lollipop-shaped elements to the park. And we have been working with Rec and Parks and the Rec and Parks Foundation to see if the Rec and Parks Foundation could raise money for the poppies. So we have reached out to potentially to private sector funders.
Well, in the meantime, I know that the film and television production industry is very happy to have that site used for base camp and for parking that the Bureau of Engineering regularly and Rec and Parks regularly work with them on, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you. The oral report will be received. Dr. Campos, have we cleared the desk?
Yes, you have.
Then we are adjourned, everyone. Have a nice week. Oh, one moment. Sorry, Commissioner Garcia, long meeting, I forgot.
I apologize, I know.
Commissioner Garcia has an adjourning motion.
I actually have two adjourning motions. Unfortunately, this past month in Northeast San Fernando Valley, part of the city of LA lost two very iconic leaders in our community, and very sad that for many years they were part of our community, and now we lost our head of those two communities. One is Mr. Reverend Arthur Broadus. He was born in 1951 and passed away 2018. Arthur was the youngest of ninth child. He was born in the San Fernando Valley, California, and completed all his schooling in the San Fernando Valley. He attended Pacoima Elementary, McLean Middle School, San Fernando High School, and Los Angeles Valley College. Reverend Arthur accepted the Lord at the age of 8 and was baptized by his father, the founding pastor of Calvary Baptist Church of Pacoima. Reverend Arthur Broadus married in 1975 to Deborah Ann Edgen Thorne and was brought back from Buffalo, New York to work and attend ministry here in the city of Pacoima. Reverend Arthur was a vocalist with several singing groups which earned many, many different awards throughout the years. Over the years, Reverend Arthur Broadus also received awards for his work in the church and also in the community. He has been recognized by the City of LA, the Girl Scouts of America, LA Gospel Messengers, Joe Rucker Leadership Award, and the NAACP, just to name a few. Reverend Arthur Broadus was also part of the Watts Labor Community Action Committee, the Pacoima Youth Cultural Center, Calvary Baptist Homes, the San Fernando Valley Youth Advocacy, and he also worked as a field representative under the office of Mayor Tom Bradley. We will sorely miss Arthur Broadus as he was part of many, many community organizations, very, very much long to list in our community, including MEND, including the Northeast Valley Best Start Community First 5LA. He was also on the executive board of the LAPD Foothill Division Police and Clergy Council. For that, we send complete condolences to the Arthur Broadus family out in Pacoima. And lastly and secondly, we also adjourned today's meeting on the life of Mr. Leroy Chase. Mr. Leroy Chase served as the CEO and president of the Pacoima Boys and Girls Club since 1968 until his passing just now, November 2018. Throughout his 50 years of professional experience, in addition to providing a safe space for young boys and girls in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, Leroy Chase also served in a multitude of positions. In 1993, Leroy was appointed by Mayor Richard Reardon to sit on the Los Angeles Board of Rec and Parks Commission, and also later seated as a commissioner for the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. Leroy Chase was a credential instructor and past lecturer at Cal State Northridge. His focus was always around recreation and leadership. Mr. Chase held a bachelor's degree in physical education and recreation administration from the University of Utah. In addition, Leroy sat on many professional boards throughout his time in the community of Pacoima before his death. Just before his death, Leroy secured funding through grants and fundraising efforts, developed a master plan resulting in an expansion of 50,000 square feet for his center, and increase the organization's assets to over $5 million. Leroy Chase leaves behind his loving family and leaves his daughter Nicole Chase to continue his legacy in the Pacoima Boys and Girls Club. Leroy Chase will be sorely missed by community leaders, professionals in many industries, a strong faith-based community, and really important, hundreds of kids that he touched throughout his 50 years of professional legacy in the Boys and Girls Club. For that, we end today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. We are so adjourned.